do their job, who does do their job, where I'm at. I don't know if I want to go through that whole learning process again. Yeah, I've been at the same place, Matthew.
I just don't want to be on call in the middle of the night anymore.
Oh,
you know,
I will not take a job
that
anymore.
Again, I should say.
Yeah, I will not take a job anymore where they tell me I have to carry a phone.
Yeah, I'm way avoiding that. Luckily, most of the things we do now for DIS is rapid prototyping stuff. So we build it, we drop it off, and then there's a whole other production team that consists of 30, 40, 50 people that actually manage just one service.
Okay, we're gonna hit record here in a second, guys. The one thing I'll say is we have Google YouTube as a backup recording, so even if one of our local recordings fail, the end is not near. What I will say though, if there's a lot of noise in your background for any reason, Matthew, best thing to do, stop talking for a couple seconds, because if you're talking when the noise is going on, I can't get rid of the noise. So if we pause, it's easier to take out of the final product. I don't expect there to be, but you never know.
Roger.
Okay, can you man your Audacity?
Yep.
Hit record in 3, 2, 1, record. Test. Let me check my volume. One thing I don't like about... I'll say this. I don't know if it happens in Mac, but I know most of the newer Linuxes and Windows, they always want to adjust your volume level.
Like automatically?
Yeah. All the new GNOMEs, all the new KDEs, all the...
Nah, it doesn't happen in Mac.
The only thing it doesn't happen in with me is when I run Awesome.
Because everything is awesome.
Exactly. Okay. Episode 14. Okay. Hello, everybody. Welcome to The Server Show, episode 14. My name is DoorToDoorGeek, a.k.a. Steve McLaughlin. Josh and KnuckleHeadTech had some family things going on. Jeff is still going through some changes here at his house. Still don't believe he has internet access, and I think he literally just went under minor surgery. So I hope everything's going well with him. Hope to hear back from him soon. I'm sure before we know it, he will be back on. But this episode, we have joining us the Honorable Chad Wollenberg. How's everything going, man?
Good day, sir. I'm doing just fine.
Very good, very good. I know you're going through a bad storm right now, so hopefully we won't have power issues at your house.
Yeah, I don't think we will. But yeah, if all of a sudden I disappear, I apologize.
No problem, no problem. We're also joined with a guest here. I've been pinged by a couple guys in the past. We try to bring them on when they show any level of expertise, and I'll say, when this guy started to tell me some of the stuff he knew, I literally wanted to throw up my hands and say, no mas, no mas. Okay. You know 10 times more than me. I think we need to have you on. His name is Matthew. He's also from the Baltimore area by me. How's everything going, man?
Great. Like to say hi to everybody and here to talk. Let's see how things go.
Very cool, very cool. I want to first just remind people, if you go to podnuts.com, there's a link to a survey at the top of the page. It's a quick 10-minute survey. We're looking at doing sponsorship deals via PodTrack. PodTrack is looking at possibly giving us a group sponsorship where we can basically group a whole bunch of the shows into a single deal. If you go take that survey and you mark that you listen to the server show, that will make it more possible that we could have sponsorship here on this show. And I will say this, more sponsorship just makes me more determined in getting more shows out and doing even higher quality than I'm already doing. So if you have time, I ask you, please go to podnuts.com, click on the survey link. And the other thing that Chad just reminded me about here in the chat, I just want to ask people, don't forget, we have Android App Addicts on this very network. The format has just changed. Smaller episodes, 20, 30-minute size. We still bring apps. We still have fun. But in addition to that, once in a while now we have a developer on or a mover and shaker in the Android arena. I can't believe I said Android arena, but I did. But don't forget, check out that show. If you listened to it in the past, I implore you, go try it again. Something tells me that you will like it.
Android App Addicts Arena Alliteration.
Awesome. Awesome. And I noticed because I'm drinking red flavored water, it looks like I'm wearing lipstick on the Google Hangout, which is not good. But with all that said, Matthew, really quick question. Dare I say, I want you to save this part for the last part. How old you are, or are about. But can I ask, what's some of your experience when it comes to servers in general? What kind of servers, and how long have you been doing this kind of work?
Well, I started out, I guess it was, man, on an old 286 back in, geez, I don't even want to say how long ago, probably over 20 years ago, down in my grandfather's basement. He happened to have a computer, and ever since then we had DOS on it. That was the only thing. So I started from there, and as I went up through school, I ran into a couple other guys who knew some computer stuff. We got into the whole BBS craze, if anybody remembers that. And then in high school, I purchased my own phone line with a job that I had and ran my own BBS for a little while, and then moved on to the big World Wide Web.
Awesome. Well, I got to ask you, since you had a phone thing, and you're in the Baltimore area, did you have charm.net?
No, I didn't.
I did, and I found a couple of tricks to where I could literally stay on for like 5 days without them disconnecting me. That was fun times.
We had a whole bunch of tricks for being able to do that too, because people would limit their connections to 5 or 10 minutes, and we would want to do things. And there was one guy in the area who had this really, really awesome BBS where 3 people could log on simultaneously because he had 3 phone lines, and you could actually chat and post on the bulletin boards, and it was pretty crazy.
Very cool, very cool.
But yeah, then after that, I started. After high school, I got a job working, getting paid almost nothing, working in computers, and I worked my way up from a help desk type level to server administration. Then I started doing server administration for the Department of Defense in various branches, and Army. And then now I'm working directly for the DISA and the Department of Defense.
Yeah, I'll say in the Baltimore area, it's almost a rite of passage for a lot of people's careers. You're going to somehow be involved with either the federal government, DOD, agencies for the federal government, or whatever, just because of the area. There's so many jobs around here like that. Now I'll say this. I'm utterly shocked at that kind of experience because looking at you, you don't look that old. Can I ask, how old are you?
Yeah, sure, you can ask.
Okay.
No, I'm 31, so I'm pretty young buck with a lot of the people I work with, and I have worked with. So.
I was going to say, for a 31-year-old, you seem like you've made it far already.
Yeah, and the job in the company I'm with now, my boss, his first name is Moosey. He has really brought me into all the parts of the business, and I've really got to wear many, many hats and see many things. He brings me into strategic meetings to talk about with potential customers. We do solutions architecting type stuff together. He's giving me pretty free rein to come up with the various solutions for the customers that we have. So, yeah, it's a mixture of a lot of hard work and a lot of hours, and just a bit of luck to get me in with companies that have encouraged my hard work.
Gotcha. Well, real quick question. This is the server show, so can I ask, what kind of server experience do you have? What kind of servers do you work on? I'm going to guess they're not just print servers.
No, the majority of the stuff I work on these days for the past couple of years have been Solaris and have been Red Hat. In the federal government space, we only really work on Red Hat, or Solaris, and so that's where the primary focus has been. I had some experience a couple years ago working in the Windows realm. It's not my cup of tea. It's not what I like. So I found a position that allowed me to focus on working Linux and Unix.
Gotcha. That's pretty cool. Okay, now you had a bunch of, let's say, focused topics that you wanted to talk about. So can I ask, which one did you want to go towards first?
Well, I think that I'm going to start with an introduction talk to the cloud concept. Okay. A lot of the other things that we discussed all build on top of that, and or all eventually leach back into that. So I figured we'd head off of the big elephant in the room that everybody's talking about these days, and define cloud concepts, and in a way that hopefully everybody can understand. And then after everybody's on the same page and we all understand, we can start talking about how should we use cloud. Should we care about cloud? What does cloud mean to me, and what should it mean to the customers that I work for, or or anybody really?
Okay.
So what I wanted to do is I wanted to start off by defining cloud, and so a lot of people have their own definition, but I found that NIST, the National Institute of Standards and I think Technology, has come up with a pretty comprehensive definition. So I'm going to quote them for a moment and say they define cloud as cloud computing is a model for enabling ubiquitous, convenient, on-demand network access to shared pools of configured computing resources that can reliably be provisioned and released with minimal management effort or service provider interaction. Now, that's a heady definition to define. So rather than trying to break down all this stuff, they have broke it down into essential characteristics of cloud. And I'm just going to kind of talk about some of these, and we can kind of just discuss what they mean and how these work. So what NIST, and I agree with, there are essentially 5 characteristics of an environment that make a cloud environment, or that will bring you into a cloud environment. The first they have defined is on-demand self-service. So roughly what that means is that a service provider, be it a VPS or an on-site service provider, your IT department, let's say, they provide the end users with the capabilities to consume and provision computing capabilities based on their needs.
Okay.
So how this is typically represented is that they're given a login name, and they're able to log in, and if you were to go with, say, like an Amazon model, as long as you have a credit card and you have money, you can spin up as big of a server as Amazon will allow you, and you can spin up as many as you like. With the cloud service model, how this is different than, say, like a vCenter instance, is you provide this to the end user, and then the server administrators on top see a different, basically a different site that shows the total amount of resources, the nodes that are being connected to, and everything that's focused around that.
Gotcha.
So the next characteristic is they define it as broad network access, and what I like to call this, or I like to define this, as software-defined networking.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is there a difference? Sorry.
Oh, that's okay.
So broad networking access is, they're kind of saying the same thing, but I feel that software-defined networking further brings it in and represents. when you're spinning up a cloud instance, you're typically not being provisioned what they call bare metal in the field. You're typically being provisioned a network resource that is a software router, that is a software switch or a software firewall, and they now also have software load balancers. So as part of this on-demand service, when you're starting, I choose the flavor or the effective configuration of the hardware I want through my self-service, and the administrators will define the different types of networks that I can create. So depending on your service provider or how you have things configured, you could spin up a brand new instance to a virtual machine, and it would be a separate network each time, or you can have them networked, or you could have the same customer spin up a subsection of on one network and then another subsection on a separate network. So a lot of these cloud providers have the options and capabilities of you being able to run a test, a development, and a production lab all in one.
Gotcha. Yeah, that seems pretty deep.
I think it's a little important to point out that as an end user, you're probably not always going to see this portion of the cloud computing. For instance, if I spin up a Linode box, which a VPS, which would you consider that cloud computing? I mean, I do. I'm not going to have the option to change like VLAN. They're going to give me an IP.
Well, that's true to some extent. I'm not sure about Linode, but there are other service providers where you can. So what they do when you spin that up, they give you an IP, but on the back end, if you spin up another VM, you have the capability of linking those two together.
Right, and that was my point. It's not always going to be visible to the user, but it is happening on the administrative side. I'm just pointing that out so people don't get confused.
Yeah, I understand. And typically, in most of my experience comes from OpenStack in the private cloud space. Even the customer login views do show, they basically show like it creates a custom network name or something like that that you can actually link them all together. And it would be where this is I want to make a distinction that the cloud service providers, if you're going with some of the big boys, they actually won't link them for you. They expect you to go in and link these things together yourself. At least that's what I've seen in some of the cloud providers. Okay,
so that's 2 of the rules.
That's 2 out of the 5 characteristics.
Characteristics.
Yeah. So the third characteristic is resource pooling, and this is where it basically gives you the ability to. It sort of ties into the on-demand self-service. Mm-hmm. You basically, as the administrators provision new nodes and new hosts for you to use, you basically go in and say, I want my server to be, I want 512 megs of RAM, I want a 80 gig hard drive, and I want, a 2-core processor. So being able to choose what you want out of that is one of the characteristics. So that's just, again, ties into the previous ones. And I think it's self-explanatory.
So I'm going to guess when they say resource pooling, it doesn't have to be hardware resources per se, just resources.
Yes. And typically in these, they actually won't be hardware resources.
Okay.
And so they define it as the ability to take resources and allocate a pool of resources of multiple tenants. So in that case, they're actually talking about taking multiple customers and running them off of the same server or not. It's seamless to you in the background.
Gotcha.
And so it also gives them the ability to take you from one physical server and move you to another one. As long as there's no downtime, the resource pooling doesn't matter to you. And it shouldn't matter to you as the customer. As long as your systems don't go down, it doesn't matter what you're running on.
Gotcha. Okay.
And then the fourth part is measured services. So what that effectively means is that they monitor and they measure the usage that you have and that your system is running. And this becomes important for the next characteristic, which is dealing with rapid elasticity. So what rapid elasticity is, this is the real, bread and butter of what makes cloud computing. And this is what makes it exciting for people to talk about. It makes what people want to jump onto it. And this is the idea that you have the ability to rapidly provision services to scale inward or outward based on need.
So grow or shrink.
Correct. So all of this kind of stacks on top of each other to support this idea of rapid elasticity. So the idea is that, let's say you're running a Tomcat application or a Rails application, or you just basically have any type of web application that you're presenting to your customers. As demands start to come in, you may plan for N resources. You might say, I think that running 2 gigs of RAM of memory, running 4 core processors is going to be sufficient enough for me.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's say some network picks you up. You get on a news network or something about your website starts to go viral on Reddit, or somebody from one of these other podcast networks hits you up, and suddenly you go from having maybe 2,000 unique hits per day to 2 million unique hits per day. The idea of these cloud provision services, if your application is configured properly and you're actually developing inside of this cloud with the cloud mentality, this won't be a problem for you. You'll be able to rapidly provision new machines on the fly based on the measured services, the metrics that they give you, and you'll be able to attach your, basically expand out your applications. And when we're talking application performance and load balancing and things like that and improvements, there's 2 models that you can approach it. The first model is what they call scaling up, and the second is scaling out.
Right.
Scaling up usually means that you buy or you purchase much more expensive hardware that has bigger, faster, better, stronger services or capabilities.
Right.
You go from running a 1U Power Edge to a 10U R series Dell or something like that.
Right. Faster RAM, more processors available to you, faster hard drives, faster network connections.
Right. Now, the understanding or the concept of scaling out is you write your applications so that the metered monitoring that goes into all of these systems, and you've been talking about monitoring in the previous episodes, so what I say to you is, if you are starting to develop an application that you expect it to be large, you have these monitoring that you're doing. Well, most monitoring systems have slight automation capabilities to them. They can say, well, if you reach this threshold of, say, 80% CPU usage and 90% RAM usage over the course of 30 seconds, perform an action. Now, imagine if we could tie these into APIs that said, hey, if we do that, now create a new instance of this application, and these are all the configurations that are required to attach back to the original instances or all the other instances.
Okay, so rapid elasticity is not just, I don't want to say I have responsibility on the server management side, but also the application side.
Yes, on the application developer side. This is where there's an entire industry that has actually built out of this notion and concept together. It's called DevOps. And the idea is that everybody is on board from the top to the bottom in making this application as elastic as possible. The developers are aware of the different cloud technologies, and they are doing their own analytics on the back end to determine if things happen. And everybody is basically focusing on the application to make it so that you have a highly available application. So if you were running something like Oracle's WebLogic or just the Apache Tomcat, there are ways of making it high available. Now, if you have a really good development team and a really good administration team, they can tie both of those together. And now, if you go from 2,000 hits to 2 million, spinning up new instances, those happen within seconds. Right. You now have an actual real elastic capability.
Well, yeah, I'll say, to me, that almost is the magic unicorn, in the sense of, I don't think a lot of people out there can actually grasp the idea of this being completely automated, much less than making it happen. This, to me, is where ninja-type brain power has to be involved in the virtualization, the hosting stack, and then the integration with the application development team. That's where you really need big brains.
Yeah, and everybody from the top to the bottom has to be, has any influence over the decision making, has to be on board. And that's what the biggest problem with cloud computing is getting everyone to understand what it can do for you and what it can't do for you. Just going and putting a MySQL database in Amazon's AWS doesn't guarantee that you're going to be highly available.
Right.
If you're only running one, exactly. You're running in the cloud. Why? How come my application failed? Because I was sending 150 million requests to my database at once. It's not able to handle that.
Right.
But
now I would say super quick. I actually knew about that NIST document on cloud. I actually found that exact document maybe 3 or 4 months ago, and I brought it up on Linux for the rest of us, and I literally have it hanging in my cube at my job. And what I tried to get across to everyone I interact with in work is, this is the actual base of what a cloud is. Now, out in the public cloud, some aspects of this we will have access to. We will be able to control other parts of it. We pay other people for it, and that's all determined on what kind of cloud do you want to go for. Do you want to go as a software as a service type cloud, or all the other different types of clouds? And I try to get them to understand, if it doesn't adhere to these 5 rules, it's not really a cloud. It's nothing more than a remote server.
Exactly. And there's really no difference between a VPS and a virtualization environment through VMware and the cloud, if you're not talking about those 5 characteristics. Now, you brought up what they call the service models, and there's 3 primary service models that focus around cloud computing. There's really 3 ways that most people interact with it. I actually have a few more that I can talk about. Just I'll touch on.
Well, that makes sense to me. There should be more than 3. If there's these 5 basic principles, then there should be more than 3.
Yeah. So just to touch through them, so everybody is on the same page, we have IaaS, which stands for Infrastructure as a Service. So when you think VPS, that is what they're providing you. They're providing you infrastructure as a service. Infrastructure will be your servers, it will be your switches, it will be your routers, it will be your firewalls. Now, where IaaS is really powerful to a customer or to an end user is when you're, say, like a startup company, and you have a great idea that you want to be able to sell this service to someone. Or what we used it for, we had an OpenStack instance for about a year where we were actually using it to build out customer proof of concepts. So we would go in, they would give us some requirements. We would say, okay, here's 80% of what you asked for. take a look at it, make sure we're all talking the same language, we're all on the same page, and then we just rip that out, bring it in locally, finish building the other 20%, and then provide that to them. So it's very convenient when you don't necessarily want to focus on, having to, do I have servers? Do I have the power capabilities? Do I have the air conditioning capabilities? Do I have the electrical capabilities?
Right.
Do I have all these other things that go into it, and the thousands and thousands of dollars of upfront costs that go into basically building out a server platform to sell to customers, or to even use internally to solve your own problems? Because effectively all cloud is trying to do is it's trying to solve problems.
Yeah.
And that's what everybody in the cloud space is trying to do. We all have problems. Every company has problems. And us as IT arbiters, we are going through trying to solve their problems. And this is just a tool in that toolbox. And that's IaaS.
Okay, well, super quick. When I think of IaaS, I think that is the closest. That's where you could. There's depths of cloud is the way I think about it. IaaS to me seems to be the deepest reaching into their infrastructure, their hosting infrastructure. You can get to where you have a lot more responsibility to maintain that infrastructure, but you also get a lot more control over the infrastructure. I think IaaS allows for the greatest flexibility for the customer, but also the greatest responsibility to the customer. I don't know if I'm accurate by thinking that.
Well, from a service provider standpoint, being in the IaaS business, when I was talking with our CEO, one of the things that he specifically said is that we do not want to get into being an IaaS provider. We are providing cloud services, but we do not want to be providing the actual hardware, the data center behind it, which to me was what sold me on that idea. Because, we were just talking before the show about how you have servers going up and down, Chad, and, in IaaS,
hey, that's confidential information. I'm just kidding.
These guys are going through, and, we're trusting ourselves to the likes of Amazon, to Rackspace, and to, all these Google, to all these other providers who have the physical backing to go in and, rip out 1,500 hard drives a month because they go bad, and not sweat, have no sweat about it. Provide 24/7 capabilities. So you, or the royal you, as a service provider, utilizing IaaS is like such a great capability that you can provide to everyone, that doesn't leave you sitting waiting going, well, now I'm going to be on call this week, so I hope our servers don't go down. If you're working outside these 5.9 cloud capabilities, they give you 5 nines. That means that what comes out to, I used to know, it's like 5 minutes of downtime per year or something like that. That takes a lot of weight off of your internal infrastructure to, and your management behind that.
Yeah, and I'll say this. Here's the thing I find really interesting about the cloud. A lot of people think there's a one-to-one relationship with someone and a provider, dare I say, of cloud.
Mm-hmm.
And it really can go endlessly deep. It depends on what kind of cloud service you're looking for, where I might be the end customer buying an IaaS service. Someone else could be managing that layer, and then behind that could be the hardware layer. So it could really be layers of companies dealing with. We're all basically working together to have our thing where each person's taking care of their one task of, I'm keeping the hardware up, I'm keeping this up, I'm keeping that up, and then I'm the guy putting the application up. I like how it separates out jobs.
Yeah, and that's actually very insightful. One of the things that is kind of the dirty little secret of a lot of cloud providers is that most of them run on top of Amazon.
I believe it.
that most of them are resellers for Amazon. There are some providers that I mentioned here that are not, but there are so many that are, and they can give you, and like you said, Amazon's running our back-end stuff. I trust them with my cards, I trust them with my shopping, I trust them with, running my servers in the background. I know these guys are going to do a good job. And there's, what do they call them? Agreements and things that are in place that require that. They have the financial resources to do all this for you. So in some cases, it makes a whole lot of sense to do that. Now, another interesting thing, another layer on top of that, that a lot of people don't think about is that you can buy pre-made OSs and pre-made builds, so to speak, of let's say I wanted to throw up a Fedora instance that was a literal LAMP stack. There's companies that go and do that. They basically build out a custom image, then they upload it to Amazon, and then you can add them and use their image based off of, and it just adds some number of cents per hour to your entire service. So they can make, anybody here that's listening to this can build a server and then put it out onto Amazon and have people actually download and use your build of the server. And you can either offer it for free or you can make money off of it. There were some pre-hardened Amazon instances that I was looking at. I'm not going to mention any names, but they were doing it. One of the restrictions that we have in the DoD is that we have very, very strict guidelines for securities and secured systems. And then we have to go through checklists and things like that in order to harden and secure them. Well, I found a company that out on Amazon that did all of this for you. Now, if we're working with a partner company that says, hey, we have an application we want you to use, we happen to be the service provider, I can say, hey, look, I vetted this this image, which I didn't, so I don't want to actually put it out there that I did. But we say, hey, look, we have this vetted image out on AWS. You can use that. Go ahead, grab it, use it. And they could build on top of that, and it would be a properly hardened server that I would guarantee myself if I had done it. And it just basically makes, there's all these different images that you can have to rapidly deploy quickly. So if you don't know how to install Oracle Database, I'm sure there's an image out there that has somebody install Oracle Database on top of Red Hat for you, which, by the way, is very, very complicated. It is not a trivial task to install that on top of Red Hat.
Yeah.
So, and there's all kinds of it's this whole community that builds on top of it. And you're exactly right that there's all these layers and there's as many or as few layers as you want you can put in there. So you can either deal directly with Amazon, use Amazon's Linux instances, and you can basically build your application from there, and you're only dealing directly with Amazon. Or you could put different images in place. You could put other different services and tie them together. You could go through resellers, and you could put as many people in that mix as is required or necessary for the problem you're trying to solve.
Right. Okay. So, IaaS, infrastructure as a service, from the virtual machine, I'll say container, down to the hardware and the environment and the physical location and the electricity and the power and the air conditioning, all that's controlled by somebody else. Everything above that, from the installation of the operating system basically down to all the software that's needed, all the dependencies that needed, all the configuration that's needed, you're responsible for. That's one type of cloud, the IaaS.
Exactly. So that leads into the second type of cloud, which builds on top of that, which is called PaaS, Platform as a Service. And one of the more popular platform PaaS providers is, I'm going to go ahead and promote Red Hat for a moment, but they have what's called OpenShift. Yeah. And what OpenShift is it's a platform as a service provider. They have basically built they run all the IaaS stuff in the back end for you, and they provide your developers a development platform. So a framework for them to use. Some of the frameworks that they have is Rails for Ruby users, Django for Python users, and Tomcat for Java users. And basically there's a minimal amount of effort that goes involved to saying, hey, I want to build a Tomcat app out in the cloud. I'm going to go to OpenShift, launch that, and now I have a cloud instance, and I don't have to worry about it. And the great thing about them is that they actually deal with the scaling on the back end for you.
Okay.
And there's other providers, and that's basically, all these other PaaS providers that are out there do that for you, but it abstracts it away from you as a developer. You don't need to understand the infrastructure underneath. You don't actually need to be an admin because they're adminning it for you.
Right, so you don't have to worry about the network configuration, the operating configuration, the application dependency configuration. You just have your, I don't want to say sandbox, but your playground where you can just drop in, start development, and everything else is their responsibility.
Exactly right. And that allows for rogue or freelance or startup developers to basically say, all right, I'm going to start on the free tier. I'm going to build out my web app. I'm going to focus all my efforts on that and all my work hours, man hours on making this app as best as I possibly can. And I'm not going to focus on, is my servers up to date?
Right.
What versions of MySQL is my server running? I don't care because these other people care about that a whole lot more than I do. I just care about getting my app built and running my app on top of that.
This is the same thing as like Windows Azure, right? And SQL Azure on the Windows side.
Yes, yeah. And the thing is, I want to go back to IaaS for a moment because all three of these, well, at least the IaaS and the PaaS tie back. There's one other characteristic that I want to attribute that NIST does not in order for what I consider to be a cloud service, and that is having accessible APIs for your developers and having exposed APIs for your developers.
Very
so
important.
I'm not sure about Azure. I've never looked into it. I just don't do enough with Microsoft. So, but Amazon Web Services, Rackspace, DigitalOcean, Google Compute, all of them have exposed APIs that you can basically take these libraries, shove them in, and then you can spin up VMs automatically out of a program instead of having to do all this manually. So NIST doesn't define APIs as a characteristic, but I definitely do. I wouldn't consider.
Yeah, I would think it would be needed. I mean, that's how you get the communication from the application level to the system level when you either want to turn resources down or turn resources up.
Yeah, yeah. And then the third service model that they list is software as a service. Now, this is a concept that has been around for a very long time, but it is now just kind of gotten this name. So the idea is that you run a program or a suite of programs in the quote-unquote cloud. And that basically equates to, think of something like Google Docs. Yeah. You have your local instance of Microsoft Office, if that's what you're using, or you can use Google Docs, which exists completely outside of your computer, or has the capability of existing completely outside of your computer. One of the other most popular software as a service products, which actually helped define the name, was Salesforce. And that's a piece of software that you connect to through, you can connect through mobile phones, computers, anything you want at all, and basically it helps salespeople be able to enter notes and do things. I've never actually worked at Salesforce, but it's the idea of...
It's Java.
Yeah, but it works good. It's a good program.
Yeah,
sure. They got Hacksorted like 3 weeks ago, didn't they?
I don't know. It's Java. I don't want to touch anything that's Java.
If I had no idea it was Java because I've used it. It's all browser interface.
Complete Java.
Really? I had no idea.
Yes, because you can get Eclipse or even Microsoft IDEs to connect to it to where you can do your development process, and it's
Well, there you
all
go. Down the stack, it's on that Tomcat, pre-configured Tomcat server.
Yeah. Once I saw it was that, I literally just had to get up from my desk and go to the bathroom for a while.
Yeah, so I actually wind up working most of my days in Java-based applications working on Oracle stacks.
No wonder you get paid so much money.
Yeah.
Minecraft.
Yeah, so one of the things you were talking about in that previous cast was was it like XSM, 1024 or whatever. If you want your server to run faster without actually needing to do a whole lot more, change that to so instead of like 1024M, change that to like 2 or 3G. And that's basically determining how much memory it's going to get.
Oh, that must have been the Minecraft episode.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, cool. Yeah,
well, you have to have the RAM, though, right?
Yeah. So if you're running a machine that has 8 or 16 gigs of RAM, if you have it set to 1024, it's only going to reserve 1024 by default. So if you up that up, it's going to reserve more, and it's just going to consume it faster. So that's a common trick I use in some of the WebLogic stuff that I deal with is.
Finally, we got to something I understand. Minecraft.
Very cool. Very cool.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, and there's a couple other service models that I figured I would just at least throw out there.
Okay.
And these are kind of softly defined, but they're rapidly becoming more and more important to people in the space. And that's DBAS, running a database as a service.
Yeah, to me that seems obvious, and I'm not trying to sound dumb, and I know it seems obvious to me because I was a database guy for 10 plus years. Developers doing applications love the idea of you just give me a method to connect. I don't care about the database. I don't care what it's running on. I don't care about any of the security. Just tell me a username, a password, and how to connect.
Yep. Now, one of the things about DBAS that is incredibly important is that it needs to be multi-tenant.
What does that mean?
That means that you have multiple customers connecting to the same database without being able to see each other's tables and things like that.
Right.
The only product, and I'm sure somebody's going to send some flaming email saying I'm completely wrong and an idiot, but the only database I'm aware of now that is capable of doing that easily, and I say easily in quotes, is the Oracle database. With 12c, that was one of the big focuses, is that they focused on allowing for multi-tenancy. So you can have, so in previous versions of Oracle database, and I don't want to turn this into a big Oracle show, but in previous instances of the Oracle database, you have ways of connecting all of, you basically install a whole bunch of hosts, and there's a way of linking them all together, and it provides high availability and things like that. That's why you pay Oracle price. What they've done on top of that now is if you, say, have 100 hosts that are all running Oracle database, and they can run everybody's database. And so all your different customers can have completely different and unique databases and have them separate. And actually, I should say, Oracle's the only one I know of in the SQL realm. There are databases outside in the NoSQL realm that can actually do that stuff.
Gotcha. Well, yeah, and I personally think that's a very important trait because I like the idea of single database containers, but having sections of them like sliced off for this user with doing this task, this user doing this task, and having the tables and the data, the triggers and everything isolated onto them.
Yep, and it's just being able to run, running in those instances, it has its own unique set of challenges, but it definitely can pay off from a service provider standpoint, because now I don't have to worry about spinning up a new instance for every single person. Everybody's using the same pool of resources that I have, and I can allocate and say user A gets this much and user B gets 10 times that much, but it allows us to control that as a and provide that as a service.
Okay.
So just a couple of other ones is LBAS, which is load balancers as a service.
Ah, okay.
That's a big popular one I've seen. There's been a lot of vendors that have been popping up dealing with that. They're everything from basic memcache servers to actual, emulated, what do they call them, VDSs, focused on load balancing, virtual dynamic switches or virtual something switches.
So you're actually talking about networking load balancing then?
Yeah.
I was actually thinking specifically like database load balancing, but I see, okay.
Yeah, well, and it focuses really on anything. Okay. It's just depending on the specific provider.
I've noticed that a lot of databases, and Microsoft comes to mind right off the bat, is database load balancing is now just built in and expected. I don't know, and I've only noticed that over the past couple of years.
Yeah, that's very new for Microsoft. I will say I like the idea of this because we were talking about separating things out. I like the idea of having a dedicated person responsible for just taking all of your traffic and pushing it out to all the proper servers. A, when I need a new server, they automatically spawn up or spawn down, but B, it can intelligently say, send it to these different servers, at different times. Because I know load balancing has gotten, in the last 5 years, insanely more complex, but it seems like most of the people I know who are doing it don't take advantage of a lot of the newest features available. And I think it's just because we're so new, we're not really used to them yet.
Yeah, and the other thing that is really nice about load balancing as a service, where this really comes in and where this really shines, is where you're running, and this is what I was going to talk about later, is when you're running a hybrid cloud. So if you're running, there's a couple different cloud models that I was going to discuss, but basically the concept is if you're running some servers locally, you're running some servers out on AWS, and you're running some servers out on Rackspace, the likelihood of you being ever down is near null. So the idea of you being able to set up a load balancer and say, okay, this is outside of me, and just basically being able to load balance between other cloud providers and local services that you have, local servers that you have. So if your network becomes saturated, then your cloud instance on X provider may not be saturated. And so that's why load balancing as a service really came and started spinning up.
Yeah, they'll say, now that you put it that way, I see how it's necessary. Very necessary.
Yep. And then the last one is identity management as a service. This is basically the idea of being able to, our company was actually building out, and part of the project I'm working on is building out effectively what is an IDaaS, identity management system, that allows for single sign-on to basically any service you want. And some of these things are back-ending by using things like OAuth and all these other things, but there are certain providers that are out there that will try and connect you to as many service providers as they will allow. And the idea is you can have all of your internal applications run everything together, and they don't necessarily need to know or understand. Application A and application B don't necessarily need to connect to the same resource. They can share those tokens that you're granted from one resource and trust it to another. So when we have development teams that are building out pieces of software or applications, you might have an application that deals with, say, timekeeping, and you might have an application that deals with human resource management, or business intelligence, or your big data solution. You have a way of tying all of them into one single identity management service provider, and now your end users have the capability of using all of these different services as a seamless transition.
So what have you run across this at all, Matthew?
Yes.
So what big identity management providers are there then? Because I know the big one, but
Well, mostly what we're trying to do, since I work for the Department of Defense, and
Right.
we are doing everything internal. So
Okay.
where we are finding the problem occurring, I'm working on a project which is called the Enterprise Identity Management System.
Oh, so you do know a lot about this.
Yes. So effectively, what we're trying to do, as per standard practice, everybody who works in the Department of Defense, no matter what your branch is, you're granted a smart card. This is common knowledge. Anybody can look this up. They happen to call it a CAC, for Common Access Card, CAC. So what they're looking at being able to do is everybody right now is siloed. So everybody issues, there's certain agencies that are allowed to issue smart cards. And every agency that is running has their own service that they run. So one of the organizations I worked for was the Army Test and Evaluation Command. They're running their own Active Directory structure that was completely unique to them, and they're provisioning their users based on the needs that they. And I moved from there to the Army Research Laboratory, both are at Aberdeen, and they are basically, they were running their own Active Directory instance, and they're running their own Active Directory. They had their own policies, their own everything that was.
That's why I was asking, because I've heard this same story before. Yeah.
So what we, so the idea is, and what one of the problems we are trying to solve is, everybody has a common token. Everybody has this common smart card. Now, how can we make everything tied together without necessarily taking the control out of the hands of each individual organization? Because the organizations have their own workflows based upon their resources, based upon their needs, based upon everything that all their way they do business. So
now, I know you don't work on Microsoft, but have you looked at Microsoft Workfront Identity Manager? Because it does exactly what you're saying, and you can tie it in the existing Active Directory infrastructures.
You can, and the problem that we have discovered is once you get into the millions and billions of users,
yes,
it does not handle the capabilities very well.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So the VCCS has the largest one in the world right now, which is, I believe, 5 million users, I think is what we have, and definitely see performance problems.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so
think about that.
What we're doing, so now you're also working in Active Directory. So Active Directory has certain limitations in and of itself, especially if you're trying to run, say, an entire Unix environment. And there's whole subsections of the government that are running in Unix and Linux environments for their specific use cases and their specific needs. So there are certain tools, and this is probably for a completely different topic, because we're going way down a hole. That, but we can discuss, identity management and in the ways other organizations and things are handling it. Basically, what our project is we are assisting in writing a white paper for it and an architecture diagram that addresses all of the problems, and we basically define what problems we are trying to solve, and we built a proof of concept that is showing all of these things together. But yeah, so those are the different service models. I'll just recap: IaaS, infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, software as a service, and then those are the three that NIST defines. And then I guess the next step would be just kind of to talk about any providers that you guys have worked with, or what experience do you have with any type of cloud environments. I know, just to talk about a couple of the actors in the cloud space, I've mentioned a few of them so far, but Amazon Web Services is the biggest guy out there. Rackspace is probably pulling up a very close second. There's Microsoft Azure, there's DigitalOcean, there's Google Compute, and VMware has actually put out a product they call vCloud Director. That is it's more focused on private clouds, but there are companies I know that are actually running it to do public cloud provisioning.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, VMware scares me because it seems like anything they want to get into, they like buffalo their way into, and they quickly become respected.
Yeah, and I'm not going to say that VMware is. I'm not going to take an adversarial stance, but the thing that I would say about anybody considering running a private cloud or running in the public cloud space, and I guess we should define those terms too, but is VMware is only concerned about VMware. The APIs that it provides you only work with VMware. Now, with that being said, there are other providers that tie directly into VMware's APIs and basically act as a middleman for you to translate this stuff.
Well, yeah, but then, correct me if I'm wrong, if your backend, your base VMware, goes through an upgrade or an update process, it could break those APIs with those third parties.
Potentially, if they change the API structure. Now, VMware is so massive and huge right now, and I mean, it just has been for so many years, that for them to make an API change that would do that would break everybody in the industry. So nobody would want to upgrade to that version. It would just be a debacle.
Okay.
And that's where some of the power of Java and some of the power, you don't like Java, but that's what some of the power of Java is that Java's been around for so long that for anybody who's looking at doing development on, say, Tomcat, they know Tomcat's a very static environment to work out of. It's a very static framework. They're constantly adding new things to it, but they're not changing the old things. They're not changing the way the old stuff works. Some of the time, there are some changes that happen that are like that, but those are all specific to something very specific. So, but to define what the different types of clouds. So effectively, you have three types of cloud. You have your private, your public, and your hybrid. Your private clouds mean if you're providing all 5 of the characteristics that we defined before internal to your own network, you're running in an enterprise, you can provide these services internally, and then you have a private cloud.
Now, here's my question. I first thought public cloud, one of the key determining factors was publicly addressable addressing, where private cloud was not publicly addressable addressing. But I think I'm wrong when I say that, because now as time goes on, the more I think it isn't where or whether or not something can be accessed, but it's more poignantly where something is physically being held and hosted at.
Where I define it as is who owns the physical hardware. If you own the hardware, you are running a private cloud. If Amazon owns the hardware, you're running in the public cloud. If you and Amazon share the ownership of different disparate servers or distinct servers, then you're running what is called a hybrid cloud.
But then Amazon's cloud is a private cloud to them, but a public one to me.
True, I guess that's true. Yeah. And I will say, I definitely think there's a good future in the idea of a hybrid cloud, just for availability. If my enterprise 5,000 plus computers has limited pipes going out to the public internet, maybe if I host that inside of my network, I can have higher availability and less bandwidth costs going out to the public internet, but also have part of that data hosted out on the public side, so when employees are home or on the road or on their mobile devices, they can access that public sector. I think that has a really good future.
Well, now, hybrid can also be, like, I use Amazon for some and Rackspace for the other, but nothing internally, right? That's still a hybrid, correct, or no?
Hybrid, the way I've always seen it defined, is that you have to have something internal. It would just be using multiple public providers.
So at that point, you're an IaaS. You're getting into that business, which is a really nasty business to be in, right? I mean,
not necessarily. So So that takes me to the final section that I have, which is, why should I care about cloud, or should I care about cloud? And the real answer is, I can't answer that for you. You have to answer that for yourself. There are some guidelines that we try and help our customers understand about cloud, and we try and weigh the pros and cons, but ultimately you're the best person to say whether cloud should carry to you or not. If you have all of the hardware that you need, you're supporting, say, 100 users, and you have 5 servers in a rack sitting in the corner, should you consider going to one of the public cloud providers or running in a hybrid space? Probably not. But running a hybrid cloud, or like contemplating hybrid versus public versus private, it really amounts to what do you have to use, what is the load that's going to be coming in, or you expect to be coming in, and how quickly can you bring a new system online. So let's just kind of talk about, let's say you have, every company putting a server on the network usually isn't, or it shouldn't be, as simple as some guy installing an OS, connecting it, and then you suddenly have a server on your network. We all have our own workflows that we follow to determine, hey, how do we get this in place? For certain government agencies, these timelines might extend to months to be able to put a server online. So, yeah, same here. And so, considering, okay, well, we have to set out an RFP and have people come to us and say, hey, we got to, this is the cost for this is the cost for that. It has to go through all these processes. You might be able to go and convince your company to say, well, we're spending X amount in electric, we're spending X amount in air conditioning, we're spending X amount in just general utilities that we're chalking up to these things. Is it worth going and using a cloud service? Well, the answer might be yes, or it might be no. Because if you're running a one-use server and you're supporting 30 people, then why are you going to continuously pay for server space? It doesn't make sense to me. But if you're planning on you and 3 of your friends who are developers, you guys have the next Facebook, how are you gonna do that? You can't just shove 200 servers in your parents' garage. It's just not going to work.
Right. Yeah, I'll say the reason I think we have the cloud, we dare I say need the cloud going forward, is because of the layers that go into it. When you're thinking about doing anything, whether it be starting a new application, new processes, new servers, new infrastructure, new whatever, because of those layers, you can calculate what level of responsibility you want, how much of that do you want to offload to someone else, how does that fit your long-term quote-unquote business model, your total cost of ownership kind of thing, to where there's benefits. There's extreme benefits, and especially in speed of deployment and the elastic nature of it in scaling. As more people, as more services, as more products, as more all this stuff comes online, the less we accept downtime, period. And I'll say this. I love the idea of a hybrid cloud. Here's one of the things I forgot to say. One of the reasons I love hybrid cloud is I can't think of anything better for DR, disaster recovery, because if I have basically data being mirrored in multiple sources in real time, internally and externally, the building I'm in could fall into the center of the earth, but the services will still be available to either outside agencies, outside companies, or the public at large. I do understand, though, like we were saying, there's a lot of work that has to go into it, whether it's the OS scaling up and out, or whether it's the application being able to tie back correctly in order to make those calls correctly. This isn't just now we're going to do something cloud, and that's the whole thing about the cloud. This is very deep. This is very deep stuff only moving forward. It only becomes more in demand, and I do think Linux is um, the best way to approach this, just because it seems like its scalability seems to be built in.
And that's partially true. And everything has been, as far as I know, up until Azure, was built on Unix and Linux in the back end. Everything that was running on, either Red Hat, Ubuntu, or any of the big guy distributions. So a lot of these things are being tied. I mean, and the fact that Linux itself is basically everybody took the Linux model of we're going to hyper focus on something really, really, really focus, become the best possible thing for that, and then sell this idea of 10 products rolled into one that is one service. And that's basically what happens in the Linux realm. It doesn't seem to happen as much in the Windows realm from my experience. When you buy a Windows product, you basically are buying one gigantic program. Even if it's like a whole bunch of different suites, they don't really consider it a different program. If you're buying Microsoft Office, yeah, you can buy you can buy it without, Access or without, Publisher or whatever, but you can buy it with. But Unix, in just the way every single flavor is built, is just, like the GNU tools. They're just sold as they're just considered, not sold, but they're just installed usually as a single application, and then you have all of these single tools. And so the idea of basically umbrellaing a whole bunch of different services and a whole bunch of different products and calling it one is very, very Linux. And a lot of the philosophies behind these, I'm going to build a framework and then give you the ability to add on to the framework to make it yours. We're just giving you the skeletons as a cloud provider. You're actually putting the muscle and the veins and the skin on top of that and making it a person, a walking, talking person.
I agree with you guys completely. I just thought it was important to point out the Microsoft stuff because there could easily be .NET developers listening to this that have robust applications that need to be dynamic that cloud computing could be a possibility for, but they're going to have to go with the Microsoft flavor.
Yeah,
well,
absolutely.
And don't get me wrong. I think Linux is the future, and it allows for the greatest flexibility, the greatest expandability, the greatest this, the greatest that. There's a need for Microsoft Cloud. That's an actual factual given. And with Mark Russinovich being one of the lead developers in Azure, I expect it's going to be successful to Microsoft people who need .NET in the cloud. I'm afraid the idea of that as a security goes, but it's going to happen. It's going to be out there. People are going to take advantage of it, and people are going to use it. I just hope with all the cloud stuff, we also advanced our security practices as much as we do our flexibility and our scalability practices. And for the time being, it seems like we're always a step behind with that, but I think we're definitely learning. And I think, to be honest, companies like OpenStack and Amazon are doing a lot more than just offering these base services up. I think they're actually helping educate a lot of people on a lot of different things.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And OpenStack, since you mentioned that, is very, it's a Linux-based cloud solution that effectively is an umbrella for multiple services. We can talk about that maybe another time, about the different services and kind of discuss what they are. That also helps further solidify the understanding of cloud.
Can we talk about Zen too? Isn't Zen part of all this?
So,
you don't have to answer that now. Maybe we can just tease people and.
Yeah, so we would touch that probably in the OpenStack.
Okay, all right.
The OpenStack stuff. It's in long and short of it. It's a hypervisor, so we don't. Most of the APIs abstract out which hypervisors you're using. They don't care. Okay. I just write my code, and then it talks to either Zen, KVM, VMware.
Gotcha.
Very cool, very cool. Matthew, I was going to say, that was the most information I think I've ever seen packed into a single podcast next to a Steve Gibson 2.5 hour podcast.
My brain hurts, man. I need another drink.
that was a lot of stuff, and I cannot implore people enough. Go to the notes of this show, click that NIST link, look at that PDF, read it. I'm not a reader. I don't read nothing. I read that document at least 50 times because I really want to get the grasp and understanding. And a lot of the words they use are not fifth grader type words. You know what I mean? They use bigger words, but to be honest, this is a very deep discussion. If computing was a philosophy, it would be cloud computing. There's a lot of very deep terms going on here that really take some contemplation to really grasp the full, dare I say, scope of what this is and what this means.
The next time someone asks me if Dropbox is part of the cloud, I'm going to point them to this episode and watch their heads explode.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah.
No,
And
it was a great episode. I'm only kidding around. And I learned a bunch, which is awesome.
Yeah, and the thing is we actually didn't get into any of the nuts and bolts of any of this stuff yet. So there's a whole lot more that we can talk about, and there's so much more we can mine out of this to get more content out of this and just kind of get everybody on the same page. So the problem is that, like you said, we're not talking in fifth grader terms. We're talking in, dare I say, college terms, and a lot of these things. Go back and listen to the first part of the definition of cloud by NIST. Just read that definition. I hope that by the end of this episode, you understand. You'll be able to listen to that and read that definition again and fully understand what it means. That's my goal, and that's why I started off with that at the beginning of the show, so we could say, here's this super complicated term. We broke it down for you. Hopefully now there's some understanding. You go back, you read it again, and you say, you know what? I do get that.
Absolutely. Yeah, this is, dare I say, top-notch. Matthew, I cannot thank you enough for coming on. Do you want to give an email address out to people, or do you want me to just forward emails that come into the show?
My email is me, M-E, at wardmatthew.com. WARDMATTHEW.
Okay, sounds cool. Matthew, I cannot thank you enough for coming on. Extremely, absurdly eye-opening content.
Yes, thank you. And I get you're coming back, right?
Yeah, we can talk about that, but yeah, I should be able to come back. I want to talk more about. So now that we've discussed and defined some of these terms, we can start talking about more specific products and how do you go from. How do we have the conversation with our C-levels to how do we actually start deploying what now we have defined as a cloud-based capability? Because I don't want to call any of these solutions or products or anything like that. We want to look at this as a capability, and that's how you sell that to C-levels. And we can talk more about that, the whole workflow and design of how you get everybody to buy on board. It's difficult.
And the reason I ask is we should definitely allow everyone to email us at tss@podnuts.com and ask questions about this episode, and that way we can answer them when you come back. That'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very cool, very cool. Chad, is there anything you want to end off with? Any maybe Miles of Gaming URL you would like to give out?
milesofgaming.com. Well, let's see. We just did something really cool, and I can't remember what it was. But we're going to be talking about some crazy Minecraft stuff next episode.
Surprise,
so
surprise.
Oh, but it's good, man. I'm telling you.
Mm-hmm. I will eagerly anticipate that content.
Oh, and lots of organic farming and backyard farming stuff on Health Nuts.
Oh yeah, dude! Tracy blew me away. 1,600 square feet.
Yeah.
That took 5 minutes to set in when he first said that.
Yeah,
was just great.
we've been interviewing for the past 2 episodes a small farmer down in Texas, sustainable farming, Tracy Holtz, and it's been interesting. And we're going to move on to some other stuff, but we're definitely going to have him back sometime soon.
Yes, and as soon as Dan stops saying the F-bomb, we can put shows out quickly.
Oh, man, don't worry. I'll get on him about that.
I'm just messing. Okay, Matthew, Chad, I thank you a hell of a lot is the only way I can put it. Hopefully Josh and Jeff will both be back on again here soon on a regular basis. With that, I want to thank everyone for downloading. Thanks everyone for their support. When you can, podnuts.com/Amazon. I will be greatly appreciative. And with that, I will talk to everyone in a fortnight. Okay, go ahead and stop the recording.
Alfie the Zane!
Go ahead and stop your audacity. Okay, Chad, I do have those 2 links that you put in the chat here. I'm going to put them in the notes as well.
You can or not, whatever. I was looking up stuff while you guys were going, and I just threw them in there.
The one I really liked, the designing a database for multi-tenancy.
Tenancy, yeah, the IBM article, that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Yeah.
All right. Let's export
Okay,
this
and
the gun.
Sorry, and we are still live, guys. I'm going to turn that off in one.
I didn't
Okay.
swear. I just said
Just
son
one
of a
second.
gun.
No, I'm not. I didn't say it because of that. Don't. I think I just heard a guilty conscience.
No, man, I've been good. Are you kidding me?
I know. No, I'm just messing with you, man.
What is this? TSS
14.
Is it 14?
Yeah.
Holy maron.
Okay, give me 1 second. 'Cause I ain't trying to sound dumb, Chad, but I got to make sure.
That's 14. I just finished listening to. I powered through them over the past couple days, so
Oh, nice.
it's all fresh.
Okay, because he said email us at tsspodcast.com. I got to make sure that email address actually exists.
I'm pretty sure that's it.
I don't see it there.
Really?
I thought that's where I would have. I thought I
that's
would have it.
where- Yeah.
I thought I would have it as a forwarder, and I
We've
don't
gotten
see it.
feedback here. What was the feedback going to?
Probably me.
I could swear it was TSS at podnuts.com.
I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying.
Now I'm going to have to find out. You know what I'm going to do?
You're going to email it, and it's going to bounce back, and you're going to blame me, and that's okay.
This is cloud computing right here. I'm going to open my Gmail.
Okay, I don't care if we're live. This right here caught me off guard. Okay, I go into my forwarders, and I get a little pop-up, a unique-looking pop-up I've never seen before on my C panel, and it says you're currently forwarding email to Gmail, Yahoo, or Hotmail.
Hey, dude, that ain't working. I got a delivery
yes, I know.
failure.
And then it says we strongly recommend utilizing fetch email as opposed to forwarding for these email services. Have you even heard of that?
Fetch.
Fetch.
Yeah.
You have?
Yeah.
Well, then there's something else I don't know what the hell I'm talking about. I never heard of fetch.
Oh, sure, yeah.
I think I get the idea. It's pull versus push. But when I come here,
yeah, so that doesn't work. So we can either make a correction or
no, man,
Okay.
I don't edit, man. Are you crazy? I'm just gonna go in and
probably
create
have that email
folders.
anyway, right? That'll be good.
Yes, yes, okay. And here's where I need to just get flat out better, and that is my overall. See,
You don't
that.
need to get better. You're great.
Okay, I'm guessing it should be Chad at Chad Wollenberg. Forward to.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay. Okay, so let me come down here.
So you should have my my BitTorrent soon. Well, it's not, for some reason it's not syncing yet, but it's in there, so it should come soon.
Yeah, I will say my BitTorrent sync I know is up just because I had it I right before the show had to Had
I'll
to
be right
add
back. I
something.
gotta see if my wife's still up. We're supposed to be watching Orange Is the New Black right now, man. You guys are cutting into my Netflix time.
Could be worse. Okay. Give me 1 second here. I'm going to cut that live feed.